What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Momentum Podcast with Aaron Smith, and today we've got Jim DeWolf on. Jim is our lead Ohio agent. He represents all of our buyers and most of our sellers on the Ohio side, and today we're talking about a subject that we were both just in the office kind of crunching on just ways that we can better set expectations and through this, and that subject today, Jim, is negotiations, kind of dissecting that moment after the buyer says, we like this house, we think we want to make an offer, right? So we're gonna unpack that a little bit. So recent situation, the one that we were talking about, first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
And I think mom and dad are involved a little bit here. So I guess run me through this. You've showed them some houses by now.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go through what just happened recently to kind of led to this moment.
So, yeah, they've been out looking for homes. Mm-hmm. Like you said, first-time home buyer, not really sure what to expect, not really sure what to do. So kind of doing a little bit of education and leading as we go through. And I think we've looked at maybe a half a dozen homes. They hit me up and said, hey, can we take this home off and look at this one instead because we really, really like the pictures. Just came on the market, as we know. Still a lot of pockets of very, very hot movement. So
well, and this one just happened to be in probably a sweet spot, sweet spot price point in a hot area of the Cincinnati market.
Yep.
So I mean, we knew it was going to move, or it obviously it was had the propensity to move quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All those sweet spots, the price, location, and the sweet spot for the buyer. I mean, it's right where they were looking. Mm-hmm. So we take a little bit of time and look at it, and they come back and say, wow, we really, really like this. And, of course, Dad and I poke around the house a while. And
yeah, you check it out and make sure, if you can identify. That's what our team does really well is as we're showing a house. We try to identify any red flags or speed bumps, foundation, roof and stuff. Even though we're not home inspectors, we want you to go into making an offer eyes wide open, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I want to do that top to bottom. Start with the roof, take a look at that, the gutters, whole 9 yards.
But after that moment, you've toured the house,
mm-hmm.
and mom and dad look at each other. They give each other the nod, like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then they utter the words like, "What's next?"
Yeah.
Right. So then, as agents, we put the cape on, and then it's like, then we get to actually, all right, now let's do the strategic work here. And that's what we're going to talk about today is just like, what is that strategy? Where do we, like, when you tell us, I think we want to buy this house, then we get to work. And that first thing we do is?
Well, the first thing I did was actually before the showing, reached out and connected with the listing agent.
Proactive, right there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hey, what's going on with this? It just came on the market. I noticed a couple anomalies with the way the listing had shown up, so he gave me a little bit of background on it. So I can walk into it and start educating the buyers on, okay, here's the background on this.
So you already kind of had some background, a little more information than the public had just walking into the house. Okay.
And as importantly, if I think that it's going to end in a negotiation, I want to start establishing the relationship with the listing agent right off the bat.
Yep.
Because that it opens the lines of communication. Doesn't necessarily guarantee me the sale, but it opens lines of communication.
Well, and if we're going to battle and we anticipate a multiple offer situation, you want the listing agent feeling like you're competent, you've asked the right questions,
mm-hmm.
and that you know what you're doing.
Oh yeah,
and,
I can
and
pull
a lot
it
of
all
that
over their eyes.
A lot of that comes through just that verbal and nonverbal cues, and like I can tell when an agent calls me and they ask me the right questions and they seem like they've got their act together. I'm like, okay, they're professional, they're solid.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got the information going into the showing, and it could be anything from, here's what's going on with the seller. They've already bought a home or they haven't, or
exactly. What are they looking for out of this? Are they looking for just price? Are they looking for a little bit of variability on when the new owners will occupy?
Yep.
What all are the sellers looking for so that when we put together our approach strategy, we've got some information to go off of, as opposed to just throwing something against the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Yeah, and I think the way that I phrase it the majority of the time is, other than price, what would the seller like to see in an offer?
Yeah.
Because we already know you want the most money out of it, but do they need time to move out after we close? Do they need to close as fast as possible? Mm-hmm. Hey, they're closing on their new house in 2 weeks. If you can close faster than that, so that if you're cash, or you can close fast so that they can use their equity out of this house to buy the next one, that would actually save them some money and some time. Well, if we can make that happen, we may not have to pay as much as the next buyer, right?
Right.
Like
right.
Cash, price isn't always the king in the negotiation. Terms play into it very well. If you can save me time or money or headache somewhere else,
Yeah.
I might not take the offer that's higher than yours because yours has a lot of perks to it as well.
Exactly.
So when we ask the seller's agent, other than price, what would make this a good deal for your client? Let's kind of bullet point this, right? So what are some things that sellers might like other than the most money?
I can get to the closing table quick.
Okay, so they can have their money quick.
Yep.
Okay, there's one. What else?
Post-closing occupancy that we talked about.
Yeah, go ahead and get their money, and they get to hang out in the house for a little bit, take their time, and move.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in this market, that can be a big thing. Giving them 30 days after close to then move out that can be the difference between getting the deal and not getting the deal.
Yeah. So those are two things. Here's a couple of oddball things that you don't think about a whole lot. Let's say that I'm going to throw out some fictitious numbers here, right? The seller's asking $100,000 for this house.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are representing the buyer. We look at the comps and they say, $100,000 is kind of the top of where I think this thing's going to go. It might appraise for 105, but I don't know. Like maybe somebody's going to offer them cash or they'll offer more. And really the seller's concern is what are they netting out of this offer? They don't care about you're paying 105 for the house. They care about, okay, after I pay all the fees to the county and the agents and all this stuff, here's what I get out of the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Well, things like this. If I'm buying a house and it's in a homeowners association,
Mm-hmm.
One thing I can do is there's going to be prorated HOA dues. There's going to be certain things like that I can, as a buyer, I can offer to pay the. Here's the thing: in Cincinnati, they pay taxes twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I sell my house in October, I have to pay taxes from January through June and then July through October.
Right.
Well, as a buyer, I can approach the seller with an offer and say, hey, guess what? You haven't paid those tax bills yet. Can I go ahead and pay them for you so you net more money out of this sale? And then the seller's like, well, hold on a second. You mean I'm not going to have to pay those taxes? But you're not paying me more for the house, but I'm netting more money.
Exactly.
And then the appraisal doesn't have to go, you don't have to pay much more on the sales price, but you still get the house because you netted the seller more money. So there's some creative things that you can do with these offers to win for the buyer that doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm just going to be the top dog.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There's some other wild stuff that you can do in there. And I know when we work with investors a lot, what we do is a lot of times we'll get a call and it's like, I don't want this house. I inherited it from my relative who was a hoarder, and they had all these newspapers and boxes and things. Like, I just don't want to deal with it. So a tactic there would be, tell you what, I'll buy the house from you. Take what you want out of the house and leave what you don't. I'll deal with the rest of it. But it's got to be at my price. They'll take less money because they just don't want to deal with the headache.
Well, that's an excellent point, because I had a situation like that just about a month or so ago where it was a really decently priced house, needed a lot of work. Took an investor through it. It was packed top to bottom with stuff. And in the negotiation of that, the investor threw exactly that on the table.
Yep.
Tell them I'll take care of everything in the house. Now, unfortunately, it ended up getting sold at a higher price. It was out of his price range, but that was one of his negotiation tactics of, hey, I'm going to go in, I'll take care of all the stuff in the house. You don't worry about that, but here's my price for that.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing too. I mean, obviously we're talking about how to help buyers negotiate here, but I think sellers should really tune in to the fact that, somebody could really offer you a boatload of money for your house. But if they're getting financing and it has to appraise, you need to start looking at some other ways to get your money that don't include the purchase price going up.
Exactly.
Because if they're seeking financing through a bank and you don't have any cash buyers who can waive an appraisal, if they're seeking financing through a bank, the seller needs to think, okay, well they're offering me $40,000 over asking price to get this house, but it's not going to appraise for that. It's just stretching it too far. You start looking at things like, well, I tell you what, give me free rent for X amount of time so I don't have to move out right away. Or, hey, I tell you what, can you pay my back taxes? Well, knock the price down. Don't worry about the price. Knock the price down, but I need you to pay my back taxes. It keeps us from under appraising, and I still get my money. So there's certain things that sellers can do that are creative as well.
Right.
That'll keep them out of, it'll kind of bulletproof the contract a little bit. So there's that. So after we've asked the questions about, I tell you what, before, like you called the agent before you ever went to show the house.
Right.
Let's talk about that scenario
Sure.
right there. House hits the market 4 hours ago. It's priced well. It's in a good location. What expectations can we draw from that?
Well, one of the questions I ask the agent is, what are the sellers looking for in here?
Right.
What are they? Okay, I'm going to stumble around a little bit, so we're going to cut this out.
Well, yeah, the main thing, where I'm going with this is, it's been on the market for 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's in a hot area at a hot price. It's going to go quick, right? Like
Right.
that's what we can glean from that, and our offer is going to have to be a good offer. Compare that to, you get a text or a call from a buyer, and the house has been on the market for 28 days. They've had 2 price reductions by now. That's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
And there's only one reason why that house has been on the market for 28 days. They overpriced it. Because, there's 4 things that make up the price. It's location, size, condition, and amenities. All that wrapped together, you get the price of the house. And if, they could fix it up, improve the condition, but at this point, they've been on the market for 28 days.
Yeah.
They've created a problem. So you call the listing agent on the 4-hour listing versus the 28-day listing. That's 2 totally different conversations.
Sure it is. Sure it is. The 4-hour listing, what I'm doing is first of all, I'm introducing myself to them.
Yeah.
I'm saying, hey, I've got a well-qualified buyer that's very interested in your house. Mostly I'll go to the MLS and I'll pull down the specifics of the house. I'll pull down the residential property disclosure and take a look through it. And if I've got questions on, how old are the mechanics of it, they're really, really interested in this. Tell me about the backyard. Does it go all the way to the fence or does it go beyond? What are the parameters of the property? How old is the roof? What are some things about the neighborhood that maybe the seller shared with you that my buyers might be interested in?
Yep.
Things like that.
And then, so that conversation with the agent there, we're basically on a job interview. Because it's like, well, I know you're going to have 8 other agents making offers on this thing. I want you to know that we're solid. We're secure. You should choose us. The 28-day listing, it's like, hey, tell me a little bit about your activity. There's one big question that hits me on a 28-day listing, and that is, have you had any offers up to this point that didn't work out?
Yes.
Because that's going to, the answer to that's going to tell us a couple of things, right? Yeah, we got an offer. Okay. Was it too low? Did the seller not take it? How low was it? And I'm listening for the language of the listing agent, because there's sometimes where a seller turns down an offer after the 4 hours, and that's the only offer that they got in that entire month, and they wish they could get it back. Because there's times where you call and the other question that I ask the agent, because I want to know, how is that agent going to present my offer to the seller? I had one, we sent the offer over to the listing agent 3 times. And I knew when I called the agent that they were too high priced to begin with. I knew it. I wanted to know if he knew it, because so I'll ask the question, hey, awesome house, love the location, it's really close to the school and the client likes that. Can I ask you, when you guys put this on the market, did you list it at the seller's price or did they list it at your price? Right?
Right.
Because if the agent tells me that they listed it at their price, well, that agent's now going to try to hold on to that price because they want to look right.
Sure.
If the agent says, well, I listed it where they wanted me to, well, I know now if I send the offer over and it's less than what the asking price is, the agent might say, well, I told you guys that it wasn't going to sell for this price. and this is a good offer, you should take it. So I know who they're going to be negotiating for based on the way they answer the question. Did you list it at their price or did they list it at your price?
Yeah.
So
And that's a great distinction too, because once we get into the financing aspect of it, yeah, obviously the seller's price is important to them, but man, we got to understand what the market's going to do. We got to understand what the bank's going to lend on as well too.
sometimes they need evidence.
Exactly.
So your client, they started digging into the comps and pricing on this house most recently here, right? They started digging into that. Kind of walk me through how things progressed from there.
So we had a couple of different strategies, and actually cash being one of those strategies, in which case we would not need an appraisal. But being as it's their first-time home buyers, the whole 9 yards, they wanted the experience of it. Mm-hmm. Plus, they're very strong buyers. We had decided that the cash offer would be a backup offer. We would go with a financing offer initially. Mm-hmm. So again, we started digging a little bit deeper into the comps. The initial comps supported the price that was being asked, and it also supported perhaps a little bit of escalation of price. Mm-hmm. But as I added more filters and started digging down into the comps were coming back not supporting it. So as an agent, I felt like I needed to make sure that my buyers understood that. So gave them the information, let them digest it a little bit as they started chewing on the fact that, well, gosh, it is well priced for where it is, but it might not be well priced for what we're looking for. They
Nice.
Came to the determination that, you know what, there are going to be other homes out there. This is great. We love it. It checks 8 of the 10 boxes we're looking for, but at the end of the day, we're just going to go on and pass.
If we're going to spend this kind of money, we want it to be a little different.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. No, that was exactly it. For this type of money, we want just a little bit more, and we know we can find it because Jim's a great agent.
Well, and you mentioned something there, too, that I feel like a lot of people may not grasp right out of the gate. As agents, we're experienced in the different markets, right? We know in certain parts of town you're going to get a Cape Cod brick, and it's going to be about this age, and you can kind of get an idea. You can ballpark. If somebody tells me a street in a part of town, I can tell them within a little bit of what the price is likely going to be. However, we don't play that way with people's money, right? Like you spent probably the better part of an hour diving into all the comps that we're looking at here.
Sure.
So when it comes time to make an offer, we don't just shoot from the hip and say, oh yeah, they're asking the right price. You could probably pay $20,000 more because that's what everybody else is doing right now.
Yeah.
No, you went and dug into the comps. You realized that, hey, okay, these things add up, but there's something over here that just doesn't seem right. I'm going to dig into that a little further. It takes us longer if we're doing the right thing for our buyer. Like they're spending $200,000, $300,000 for a house. We're not just going to say, oh yeah, offer them another 20, you should get it.
Yeah.
That's just irresponsible. So.
That is.
So, yeah, that's cool. So rewind for a second. You mentioned cash was an option. Mm-hmm. Financing was there as well. For those who may have a resource that has cash, but they ultimately want to finance, what's a way we can kind of back into that deal? It said something about mom and dad buying the house and then they refinance it later or something like that. So they had talked about that. What did you guys come up with if they were to move on that property? What do you think they were going to do?
Well, if they were to move on that property and the buyers really, really were set on it, we're going to do this, then we're going to go with a cash offer.
Okay.
We're going to go with a cash offer, and then what we're going to do after that is they're going to finance the portion that they can and basically owe mom and dad a second mortgage if it didn't appraise out.
Yep.
Now, my concern in that also was, again, what's the value? What is the lender going to ultimately come back and say? Because even though that sounds like a great scenario to be in, and it is a great scenario, at the end of the day, I don't want the cash buyer to be out money either.
Especially if they can't get it back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if they're offering $260 on a home that's only going to appraise at $240, they're out $20,000. They're upside down the house to begin with.
Yeah, they're not going to get that back.
And some people, they're okay with that, and if they're okay with that, that's fine. But I'm going to give them that whole scenario before we walk into it.
Yeah, you're going to make sure they understand the risks.
Exactly.
I had one time where my buyer won the negotiations. We were in multiple offers, and we only had to go a couple of thousand over asking price. But what we did is we made our offer that the buyer is going to secure conventional financing, and here's the date that they have to hit, right? We got to close by this date on conventional financing. If it doesn't close by that date with conventional financing, we will write a check for cash. So what that did is they didn't put a financing contingency in at all. They took the financing contingency out completely, and they said, we are going to do financing. However, here's our proof of funds for cash.
Yeah.
If we don't have a secure loan by that time, we're just going to pay cash. So what they did, they put the closing date out 35 days. Everything goes well with the financing. The appraiser comes in, does their thing. Again, not contingent on the appraisal. So if they had appraised short, they were just going to bring cash to make up the difference. But they were confident in what they were buying. So I actually had to explain to the listing agent. So they're getting financing? Yes. But there's no financing contingency. No, they have cash to back it up.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens if it doesn't appraise? They'll bring the difference, or they'll show up with cash. Like, so you had to, because it's not common, right? So I had to show up and explain that to them, and they're like, oh, so just like a cash offer. I was like, it's exactly like a cash offer.
So in a lot of aspects, we're not only educating our buyers, we're also educating other agents, you know?
Well, and here's the thing. There's 1,000 agents in Northern Kentucky. There's 5,000 or 6,000 agents in Cincinnati. We have no way to control what training they've gotten,
Exactly.
what their experience levels are, or anything like that. So we all get to educate each other. Hey, maybe, and sometimes even though that agent's with another company representing a different person, my buyer wants to buy it, your seller wants to sell it. Let's work together, and let's put together this awesome transaction, even though we may not be partners and we may be, what would you call us, competitors. But we also get to work together towards a common goal, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, I didn't make that agent feel like they were an idiot. I was just like, hey, this is an awesome way to do this. It's really good for your client because the deal won't fall apart due to financing, and it's really good for my client because they get to finance it with no financing contingency. Both parties are lucky. They're like, oh yeah, this really makes sense. So, so that's helpful.
One of the things you hit on just a few minutes ago too, about the financing, is another thing I do entering into kind of the pre-negotiation stage is I reach out to the lender, whoever the buyer's lender is.
Oh, yeah.
Start getting them involved. And in this particular circumstance, that lender actually reached out to the listing agent as well to assure them that, okay, the financing, like you said, okay, we've got a financing offer and then we got a cash offer. You don't see that often. Here's how it could work. Not only are they well qualified, but we do have a backup. So when you see this come through, especially with the financing contingency, it's a little clearer to the listing agent that can then present it to the seller a little bit better.
Yeah, you heard it right here, folks. Jim DeWolf just said it, and that is get the lender involved. When you're submitting your offer, as a buyer's agent, we try, if we feel like it's in our client's best interest and that sort of thing, when we send the offer over to the listing agent to present to the seller, we will copy our lender in on the deal and on the email so that the lender can chime in, reply all, and just say, hey, I've run their credit, I've got their tax documents, their debt-to-income ratios, everything is in alignment for a perfect closing here. They probably won't go all in like that way and just give you a guarantee. However, they can reassure the selling listing party that the transaction is going to be secure, everything's going to be good, because that is the seller's probably their biggest fear, that once they go under contract, something's going to kill the deal.
Right.
And that they want to eliminate those speed bumps and those roadblocks every chance they get.
Sure.
So, all right, guys, that's our dissertation on kind of what goes through an agent's head the minute you say we want to make an offer on a house. We're looking for your strengths. We're looking for where are we weak and how can we bolster that up a little bit. Jim is our top Ohio agent on our team, and he's happy to help on the Cincinnati side. We got you covered on Kentucky too. Thanks for tuning in to the Momentum Podcast. Thanks.